is to go to our opening devotion with Phyllis. Phyllis, take it away.
Thank you. I'm unmuted, correct? I have an IT assistant today who's helping me. Let's take a deep breath and just settle ourselves for a moment. A reading from Genesis. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. There once was someone who did such amazing things and said such wonderful things that people followed him. And as they followed him, they just couldn't help it. They had to ask him who he was. And once when they asked him who he was, he said, "I am the light." A reading from 2 Corinthians. Therefore, since it is by God's mercy that we are engaged in this ministry, we do not lose heart. For it is the God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for the light. We pray, God, that your light will shine upon the leadership of this congregation and be a source of guidance to us. Work through us, God, so that we may also be a light. Amen.
Phyllis, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Again, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. This is our first or re-inaugural. I don't know what word to use, but we used to have a congregation leadership retreat about this time many years ago. We stopped doing it, and now we're going to restart doing that. This was a suggestion of the visioning team that we certainly wanted to embrace. We are recording today, so that we have a recording of this for those who might not be here. So just be aware of that. And I sent out an agenda that we will be following. So if please do refer to that as we go along. I'll be following those times fairly strictly, so we can make sure to have all the conversation and all the discussion that we're going to have today. Before we do that, though, our next thing is that we're going to do introductions. And I always get worried about these Zoom introductions because I feel like people don't know how long 15 seconds is, and they'll start saying something, and they'll say, well, let me tell you about this, and let me tell you about that, and then they don't realize that they've introduced themselves for a minute. So I budgeted 10 minutes for the introductions, and there's 25 people, and so you can do some math and figure out. I'm just going to call it 15 seconds, and maybe that will make up for the error. What I'd like you to do is you're going to include your name, your role with the congregation, so sort of what leadership role, why are you here, and then briefly, one accomplishment by the congregation in the past year of which you are proud that we did. So for instance, my name is Craig de Almeida. I am the president of the congregation, and I am proud of how quickly we shifted to virtual education at all levels when the pandemic hit. I will call out the order as we go along. I don't know if everyone has the same order, but I'll be doing it left to right on each row and then row to row. So we'll start with Carol.
I'm Carol Gregg. I'm the pastor to the congregation, and I'm proud of the fact that we studied Ezekiel last summer, and it's a really difficult book, and we actually, I think, enjoyed it.
Thanks. Ben.
I'm Ben Wexler, and I'm chairing the administrative committee, trying to follow the lead of Janelle. And I'm a member of the choir, but I think the greatest thing that I remember of the congregation achieving is the annual meeting over Zoom. I thought it was almost a miracle how it went.
Thanks. Janelle.
I'm Janelle, and I'm rolling off the congregation after the council after 3 years as admin chair. And I'll kick back to pre-COVID and say I thought that our Marvel of this Night was just fantastic. It was neat to be part of.
Thanks. Fran. Fran, I cannot hear you. Try again.
Mute yourself. Right. I'm Fran, and I represent the Education Committee on the council. And Craig stole my favorite thing, which was pivoting to do the virtual training. But in particular, I would call highlight to the retreat, the mini retreat that went from 2 days at the beach to 15 or a couple hours with Zoom.
Thanks. And Jack.
I'm Jack. I'm chair of the Education Committee. Could be many things, but the thing that I'm proud of most today is the Education Committee putting in place the foundation for a new group study, not principally a Bible study, but a small group spiritual growth experience, which you're seeing advertised in the congregation news sheet.
Jen.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen Daniil. I am the chair of the Nominations and Leadership Development Committee, and I'm just gonna be proud of and give a shout out to my committee that did an amazing job recruiting this year, especially Jane and Lucy, who called people because I don't like to use the phone. So just really, really proud of the way they recruited super diligently this year.
Thanks. Elaine, or Mom. Mom, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, I'm not anymore. Elaine de Almeida, I am assistant treasurer, and the thing I'm really proud of is how well the pastors, ministers of music, all the worship, how they've planned the worship every week virtually. I think that's meant a lot to me and to a lot of people.
Linda. Hey, Linda, you're on mute.
Sorry. Linda Gauger, I'm head of the birthday callers and the care ministry. I guess what I'm most proud of is the fact that in these difficult times, we have gone from caring in person to caring over the phone, which has been a big challenge, but for the most part, we are successful at it.
Thank you. Han.
Hi, my name is Han, Program Area Coordinator for Congregation Care. One thing I'm proud of is the young adult and university students group, which have grown, and I've seen some new people as well, and it's been consistent.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Phyllis is there. Bill, we'll go to you.
I'm Bill Jones. I'm chair of the Missions Committee. And the one thing I'm most proud of is the way that we've continued to engage with our mission partners and agencies in the community during this pandemic.
Good. Emily.
My name is Emily Alexander, and I co-chair the Fellowship Committee. What I'm most proud of is that when we hit this rough spot of not being able to be physically together, we really haven't skipped a beat. We maintain connections, and I'm grateful for that.
I'm Elizabeth Kinley, and I also co-host or co-chair the Fellowship Committee. I'm also most proud of the fact that we were able to continue to try to provide everyone with a family atmosphere, a place where they could join, come together and join.
Jane. You're on mute, Jane.
My screen shows me in a different position than the way you're calling people. I'm Jane Fellows, and I'm on the nomination committee. And I certainly will echo what a lot of you have said, but Carol and Linda and I were in Whiteville, North Carolina, when all of this came crashing down upon us. And we were there when we got up in the morning, and Carol said they've closed the chapel. And we said, oh, no Easter service? And I don't know why that was sort of first on our mind. And indeed, we came home, and within a week, we were back having virtual worship and many different. So I agree. I'm very proud of the way we pivoted, as Craig said, quickly.
Ken.
I'm Ken Arneson. I'm coming on to the nominations committee and saying, yeah, just proud of how we've reacted to the change of the new normal.
Thanks. And the other Ken.
Yes, I'm Ken Moland. I'm a pastoral assistant for pastoral care. And I'm really proud of how the congregation has, I think, raised its profile in the chapel community during this time. It's been a good thing. And I really want to share that, that Carol has done a great job with that and being much more involved with worship and preaching.
Brady.
I'm Brady, serving as Vice President of the Council. I'm particularly excited this year that we completed the strategic plan.
Lucy.
The secretary, and for a couple months I was on leadership and nominating and leadership development. And I'm really proud to be part of a congregation where so many people said, yes, I will serve.
Regina.
Regina Ward here, and good morning to you all. And I'm most proud of the connections that have been done through the format of getting folks volunteering to contact folks by phone or by email. So bringing the congregation together as the body of Christ. That's what I'm thankful for.
Mary.
I'm Mary Anderson. I'm outgoing secretary, and as someone who loves efficiency, I thought the annual business meeting went incredibly smoothly, and I appreciated that.
Drew.
I'm Drew. I'm chapel support coordinator. I'm most proud, I guess, in a way that how involved the congregation is, and everybody steps up to do what's needed and done. And I'm gladly able to see we're starting to offer communion again.
Whitney. Whitney, are you? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm having problems with my phone. Apologize for no video. My name is Whitney Schwab. I was serving as the council representative for staff parish relations, and I'm now pleased to be serving as council representative for nominations and leadership development. And of the greatest accomplishments, I would say certainly two that I was part of. One was being a part of having Pastor Ken start with his ministry, and the other was certainly completing Pastor Carol's 360 review.
Nathaniel.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel, and I'm going to be working this next year as the student intern leading Bible studies, and I am really proud of the congregation just being very welcoming. Like I made all of my first friends at Duke through the young adult service. So that was, or through the young adult Bible study. So I'm most proud of y'all doing that.
Thanks. Johnny. John Mullins?
You're on mute.
John Mullins, Chair of Stewardship and Finance, and I'm most proud of how efficiently our team stuffed those stewardship envelopes this year and got them mailed.
Terry.
Me?
Um, I'm Terry, and I've been on education for years, and I've just taken the chair of staff parish relations. And I'm delighted that we choose a theme each year, and that it's prayer this year, and that there's a wealth of information from people to choose good books to study.
Thanks. Phyllis.
Phyllis, the children's pastor. I am proud of the fact that when we needed to open a second Godly Play classroom, that came together, and especially that volunteers stepped up. So without the volunteers, it wouldn't be possible. So that's what I'm most proud of.
Thank you. Mel. Mel, I can't hear you. No, I'll come back to you in just a moment, okay? Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Lobby. I assist Pastor Carl with the discipleship ministry that we're trying to develop. And the thing I'm happiest about is that when all this lockdown started, we were in the middle of our pilots of small groups, discipleship small groups, and that's just went on smoothly as if nothing had changed. So I'm very glad that happened.
Good. Beth. Beth Turkey, you may be on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. So I'm Beth Geddes Sturkey. I'm just have finished my time on nominations and leadership development. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is that our women's Bible study has continued to meet every other week. We do it obviously not in someone's home, but it has been such a joy to stay in touch and support each other through all sorts of good and bad experiences, and study together and pray. Bye. Thanks.
Steve.
I'm having some internet issues fading in and out here this morning, so I've had to re-log on twice. I'm Steve Harper, and been in the congregation almost 20 years. Served as president and on the finance committee for many years. One of the things I'm really proud of is that it was in my presidency we were able to hire Carol as our pastor, and that was pretty exciting. I keep on serving as the sole representative for our refugee families that we sponsored some years ago, and that's pretty exciting because I've watched these children, 22 children, grow and develop into college age and graduate things and move into adult lives. It's been very exciting. This congregation has made all that kind of thing possible. It's just unbelievable.
Thanks, Steve. Nancy.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Warasek, and I represent the Missions and Outreach. I had been on council for the last several years, and I'm rotating off. And I would say I'm most proud of, again, to echo sort of Bill's comments, that we've continued to partner with our agencies in our community.
Great. Mel, let's come back to you.
Can you hear me now?
Just barely. Speak loudly.
Phyllis and I are in the same window. Long window. Stairs in the classroom. My name, picture. Both Phyllis and Mel in it.
All right. That was barely audible, Mel. Oh, when you speak later, we might have you and Phyllis switch positions, because Phyllis was easy to hear and you were not. So we'll do more of that later. Thank you, everybody.
Is that better?
Yes, that's much better. That's interesting.
That is so weird. Literally, I moved 6 inches.
Yeah, I know. So it must be directional.
So I'm Mel Snyder. I was a member of the visioning team, and very proud to be part of that process, and have a great result come out of that.
Thank you. There is so much for us to be proud of as a congregation. Hearing all these different things that we've done over the last year, it makes me feel very proud. It makes me feel proud that we have such a wonderful set of leadership to help guide through that and help our members have the church experience that they want to have through all the various things that we do. we are going to pivot to a little bit more critical reflections of the past year now. It's very easy to say that we're going to be proud of this, we're proud of that, and then just move on. But if we're to grow as a congregation, and in our mission statement, we seek to grow together, we need to also talk about those things which may not have gone well and try to figure out a little bit more precisely what we should continue doing and what we should stop doing. On your agenda, in a moment, we're going to just break out into breakout groups, and they'll have 4 to 5 people in them. Carol, I think we'll do 7 breakout groups as we discussed before. And so what we will have is 3 themes. Thank you, Jen. And I'll ask you to talk about each of these things. How our theme of discernment worked, how well that worked or did not work well, how communication within the congregation, the different ways that we communicate within the congregation, how did that work well or not well, and then becoming virtual and acting as a virtual congregation, how has that worked well or not well? So there are 3 themes, and I want you to come back after the breakout meetings and be able to speak to something that went well, and at least one thing that went well, and at least one thing that did not go well. When you go into your groups, make sure that you choose quickly somebody who's going to record your thoughts and speak for you. When we come out on the other end, I will ask for volunteers to talk about these 3 things and these well, not well on each of those things. You'll have about 10 minutes within your breakout groups, and we can go ahead. Actually, real quick, any questions about the instructions? Go ahead and we'll go into your breakout groups, 10 minutes, and we'll gather back soon. You can click the join break.
Hey, Diane.
Hi.
Everybody's in breakout rooms, and they've got a couple more minutes on breakout. Let's see, 4 more minutes. And I'm not sure I know how to send one person into a breakout room.
Oh, sorry for being late.
No, that's all right. Yeah. Oh, here we go. I can assign you to one. I am just going to send you into room 3. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Here I go.
Did it go? Did you say?
It's a nice little group. Now I need to go back up there. I don't want you up there.
Carol, how many breakouts did we have?
7.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Jen, as you take notes for this session, will you be showing things on screen or not?
I can do that either way. What would you prefer?
I think it's helpful to show things on screen so we have less repetition.
Okay. All right. Well, you're going to get a sneak preview of what Group 1 said.
Sure. Yes. I was expecting you would have a table. Nicely done.
Well, it was easier to organize.
Yes.
We got returned.
Yeah, we were in the middle of talking.
Well, I'm sorry, your time is up too.
Really? Forever?
Craig's in charge, so of course it'll be just precise and right on.
Yes. And before we hop into this, I just want to catch people who didn't get introductions before. Diane, would you like to introduce yourself and your role and one accomplishment you're proud of for the congregation?
Okay. So I'm Diane Garber, and I'm the connection to the mission committee, and I've worked with the mission committee for the past couple of years, participating in some of the projects, and I'm very glad to have a closer connection with the council for the congregation.
Thank you. And at one point, I thought I saw Kirsten on here, but I'm not sure if she was able to keep with us. Kirsten, are you here?
No, she's not here.
Okay. Thank you. So what we'll do now for the next 15 minutes or so, or maybe a little bit less, is we're going to walk through each of these three areas. Not everyone's going to be able to talk about everything, but each of you chose a speaker, and we'll go through the three things and gather some ideas. We won't have time to put a bow on this. I'll take some time afterwards to put a bow. This is just getting all of the feedback out there. So discernment, things that worked well or didn't work well. First, one or two comments about what worked well, and just speak up.
Okay, I'll speak up.
Yes.
In our group, the issue for us was how is that weaved into the messages that are given during the sermons, when there seems to be not a connection between the congregation's theme and what's being preached from the pulpit. Sometimes the theme has been forgotten about. What is it about? What is the purpose of the theme for that given year? So there were some questions there because we kind of forget about it.
Other thoughts that people had on that?
Our group said, go ahead.
We felt the online services have generally worked well, particularly since the staff has learned to look right at the camera when they're talking. That has made such a difference. More like the newscasters. We wished in our group that the Duke rules could be expanded so that we could have additional personnel to read scripture, or have a soloist come in to add to the service and to add some additional variety, and then as well relieve our staff of having to do every single thing. We're looking for a way to have more inclusiveness in the service. We don't know what the answer to that is.
Thanks, Steve. And just as a general reminder, we, as a congregation, we have little say in what happens in the worship service. It's not one of our pillars in a way, that we do help in lots of auxiliary ways. Phyllis, you're saying something.
And under the topic of discernment, we thought that it was covered well, that the theme was carried throughout the year. It was hard to follow through with it because we closed down due to COVID, and it felt like it was kind of left hanging, or there was really no wrap up to that.
Faded away. Any other thoughts about discernment?
I think the book groups were very helpful in helping us to really study the subject. That those of us who participated in the book groups gave us a little more connection to the topic and study of it.
So in our group, we noted that less active or engaged members might not have been aware of the theme. particularly those who don't come to classes or don't do the book groups. And so we thought that maybe we could raise the profile of the theme a little bit, either in services, like for this year of prayer, noting that Psalms are a form of prayer, or also in our communications from the congregation, having like a little tag, maybe under the emails or in the titles, reminding people that this year is the year of prayer.
Good suggestion. Let's move on.
I second what Jen said. Sorry, our group said the exact same thing.
Oh, excellent. Okay, we are going to go on to the next item. Lots of great comments here. Communication within the congregation and among leadership committees and staff and the membership. Our group had the most to say about this, so we'll see what others said. Who wants to start off communication?
I can comment. Our group number 4, that's where we spent most of our time on community. Whoops. Am I muted? Yeah. Can you hear?
You're fine. You're fine. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Brady.
All right. We recognize to start with the challenge that every organization has with communication. It's always an interesting challenge. And the challenge is always to make it more effective. And part of our discussion was maybe highlighting certain parts of different ministries so that people become more aware rather than just the broad general picture. One possibility was maybe having a text message type of tool that could highlight certain ministries or give a particular recognition during the year of some. For example, the children's ministry was one that we sometimes ignore or aware of something, but not really aware of what's going on. And possibly to make a distinction between the newsletter and the various other messages so that the newsletter is very clearly identified in light of all the different messages we all get. So that we know that's the one we really have to work through compared to a message that just highlight a special like speaker or something, or we have a seminar.
Thank you, Brady. Lots there. Other thoughts on communication?
So in group 5, we thought that, eNews really provided a good vehicle, was a great communications opportunity. We also talked about Kirsten Ford doing a good job in terms of increasing our social media presence, but some thoughts about is there more that we could do there, particularly in this virtual area. There was also some discussion about communication with outside organizations, because that gives us a chance to learn from others and determine how we can be a strong participant in the community in which we live. And then lastly, there was a comment about good communications among leadership. The member-to-member communications still a challenge.
Thank you. Other thoughts about communication?
We had the birthday calling coordinator in our group who reported that, and that's Linda, who said she thought she would be able to get more people on the phone during this time period, but it seems to be, as always, a lot of voicemail and email, but many times she does hear back from those folks. So it still remains a good way of reaching out to members on their birthdays. And we also said that there have been some technical difficulties with folks going to virtual, having issues with the technical part of that.
Group number 6, what we discussed was some mixed thoughts on communication in terms of connecting with the various members, whether it's by phone or whether it's by email that came up from the connecting groups. And just communication is an issue that's going to be ongoing, but whatever we're doing, we should continue to do it and do it well and do it with the humility of the Lord as we're doing it. Some people are going to call back, some people will respond, some will not, but we don't have the responsibility for that. What we do have responsibility is for us to continue to reach out and to care and to connect.
Our group really enjoyed the newsletter and also thought that the leadership overall was just great in terms of being very accessible and very easy to talk to and very just open to interaction.
Thank you. Any last tidbits on communication, things that haven't been said yet?
Craig, if I could just add after hearing some of these other things, I think we need to be mindful of not going completely to using technology. We have about 40 to 45 senior members in our congregation. Some of them are very computer savvy, some of them not so much. And I think in some ways, hopefully our caring committee is trying to keep those people connected. But as a congregation as a whole, we need to be cognitive of this.
Thank you. And that's a good transition to our last topic, which was being a virtual congregation due to the pandemic. Things that work well, we should continue doing. Things that did not work well, we should stop doing.
Our group talked about that how the fellowship events have been the best they can be, recognizing that it's not ideal, it's not the best way that we want to interact with one another, but that those have really filled a need. And also that we thought the annual business meeting was awesome and really efficient, and we should always do it online and just have lunch together another time.
In our group, we talked about when it comes to the virtual congregation that we recognize that there are technical barriers. And I think this relates to the comment about the older congregation that's just not engaged with the technology and needing to expand our methods for reaching that segment of the congregation. We also talked about on the fellowship events, how they were lower involvement, fewer people, but again, as Jen said, as good as they could be in this environment.
Just to add to that, Zoom actually has a way to contact by phone. There may be some instruction required for the older ones that only have a telephone, but it's, you know, somebody could reach out to them and walk them through how to connect, at least by phone, for those types of connections. We noted that pastoral care is not as easy, has to do somewhat with the receptivity of the congregants. Again, what Regina said was wonderful. You know, our responsibility is to reach out and show we care. But one comment was, it's hard not to be able to give hugs to people. And doing pastoral care by phone or Zoom limits this. So doing the best we can with that.
We felt that committees have grown and learned through this way of communicating and having Zoom meetings, and that one of the things that Whitney mentioned was for the council, when the admin committee took the leadership in getting reports ahead of time and having less working it out in the course of the meeting, but trying to do preparation ahead and getting reports prepared ahead had worked well. But that basically committees, we felt like had grown and improved in their ability to function in this way.
Thanks. Any last thoughts on the virtual new things? Go ahead.
Group number 6, what came out of it was in terms of the transition that we've made, that it has gone pretty well. But what was also mentioned was, could something be done like with podcasting for some of the sermons or various topics versus the sermons being given all the time? But I know we don't have any control over that, but just a thought in terms of pivoting and the use of old hymns, or the use of former services that were conducted where you saw the congregation as a whole, where you saw the people, you could see the synergy and the energy from some of the old sermons and things that were done. Certainly you can get that off of YouTube, but that was a suggestion.
Wow. There's so much good stuff in there. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our speakers and recorders for faithfully giving all the thoughts of the various groups. Jen, Paul says there are many talents in the congregation, in the body of Christ, and your note taking is awesome. So thank you so much for doing this for us. We are going to now go to a different type of reflections, and I've asked each of the 4 members of the visioning team to lead us in reflections on the strategic plan. And so in the strategic plan, which I hope all of you have taken a look at, if not, remember that I've sent it by email, but it's also on our website under the About Us administration section. I hope you will take some time with the strategic plan. I encourage everyone to spend some time also with your committees with the strategic plan, especially those things that are there. What we'll be doing today is asking each of our representatives to talk about a page. This is not to talk through the page, you all can read, but to talk a little bit, give a little bit more background about what the intention was and the discussion that was behind these detailed pages. With that, we'll go ahead and go to Drew, and you can talk about chapel worship.
All right. Chapel worship, in a way, at least to me, speaks for itself. We are the first face that congregants, visitors see. We are the blue robe. We welcome people. And the ushers, altar guild, offering counters, nursery attendants, it helps the chapel flow and function to be for us. I really don't feel there's much I can say but we need to encourage one another to be present in worship as often as possible. We do want to continue and have a strengthening relationship with chapel leadership to make the congregation more present, known, and what's going on. So I'm not really much more of what I can say.
No, that's very helpful, and it's a great reminder just to center us on how worship through the chapel and in the ways that we help support worship are that's the first face of the congregation that many people see. Not always the first entry, but often the first entry point. So thank you for reminding us of that. Mel, let's go on to you in Christian education.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So the position here is just so strange. The microphone, on my laptop must be so narrow. It's just crazy. Anyhow, education, clearly one of the pillars. One of the things I thought was interesting was I looked back at the 2014 strategic planning session to see, some of the notes back there. They were very similar to the notes that we ended up with this year. And, substantive educational opportunities, across the entire age group in our demographic, and some, desire to reach out to young families was from 2014. So you see that reflected, in some of the things that we have done and continue to do. I thought the other interesting background thing was from the survey that people gave some very good feedback from the survey this year, which yielded right into the results that we have, in our new visioning plan. And people made comments like they were impressed by the growth in the involvement of young children, both in educational programs and worship. So it's interesting that that's a comment that came out from the survey, and that's something that we tried to do back in 2014. So those are really very quality measures, I think, that came out. One other thing I wanted to point out was, we continue to do the same things, and people reinforced that the things that we are doing, maintaining these strong foundations, is exactly what we want to do. There's virtually no substantial changes, from previously. But one of the new things is the small groups, is a relatively new thing for deepening our connections. And I think it was worth pointing that out. And I think that moving forward also, the last bullet is worth looking at, and that is to have a tighter bond between the congregation and the university as a whole, and all of the opportunities and conveying those back into our congregation. And that, I don't think, matched out to 5 minutes, so we'll buy some time here.
I don't mind buying time, but I appreciate, one of the things that's tricky about strategic plan is that when we have these deepening connections, the vision team has things which, this is a 5-year plan, this is a long-term plan, and we have to decide, we can't do everything at once. But I do appreciate how there's been a very intentional move towards the small groups early on. And I want to make sure that as you look at this strategic plan, and you look especially at the deepening connections section, know that if you see it all and it seems a little bit overwhelming, I suggest that you focus on one thing and say, you know what, at least we could make some headway on this one thing. And I think there's a lot to be gained from putting a lot of energy behind one particular initiative, getting that to the status of a strong foundation, and then working on the others instead of trying to work on everything at once. So I just want to highlight that in general as a strategy for how to use the strategic plan. And this is a good example of that, where there is that focus on small groups. And it'll be a lot easier to promote events, chapel, div school, and such, when there's probably more of them than there are right now. Thanks. Janelle, let's go to community service.
Okay. So we had lots of lively discussions about community service, both within our team and with other members of the congregation. Certainly community service has always been an important part of what the congregation does, both on campus, in town, and around the world. And we want to continue with the things that we're doing. Some other areas that we talked about expanding are in the ways maybe we could support students. We talked about some innovative thoughts of, helping freshmen move in, being sort of long distance parents and baking cakes for the birthday of a student on campus on behalf of parents remotely somewhere else, or this kind of thing, being able to set up something of that sort. We also talked about coordinating with the chapel staff and other religious life groups to see if we're doing service projects locally and they are, maybe we could work together with them and maybe draw students into the congregation a little bit that way too. And then we talked about being aware of how current events open up service projects. And that was really driven by discussion of immigration and the difficulties that immigrants have been facing recently. I would say that since COVID has happened, we probably have to pivot away from talking about these student things right now, just because that's something we're not able to contact quite the way we'd hoped, but put that on the back burner and remember it for later. But of course, current events have opened up a lot of opportunities in the world of Black Lives Matter. And certainly, frankly, for me, it was from the pulpit that I really first realized how much the war on drugs has served to disenfranchise large numbers of Black people. And, because once you've got a felony record, you may not be able to vote. And things like that are things that maybe our efforts that people from the congregation should consider focusing on, and how they can help with what needs have been brought to mind by current events. So that's what I've got, and off to Brady, I think.
Yes, Brady, go ahead.
Mute.
All right. I had the good or tough pleasure of being sort of the semi-facilitator of this group as vice president of the council, and appreciate so much Drew and Janelle and Mel, and with the great leadership and support of Carol, and then Michael helped out, and particularly with Robin Barefoot, who was our chief facilitator, had lots of experience in this area. So we actually started June a year ago and worked for 10 months. What we thought, I think, was going to be several months and fairly easy. The more we thought about it and reflected upon the mission and then dividing up with a vision, it became a little more complicated and demanded more thoughtful reflection on it. As we discussed these three that you heard about, worship, education, and service, I know for me at least, those seem to be fairly obvious. We could expand and think in terms of elaborating on them. But then we came to that fourth item, which in the previous mission statement was celebration, not the term life together. So we felt we had a good feel for those three, but then celebration, we started wondering, what did that really mean? Obviously, it was very effective and good in some ways, but perhaps not adequate. And so the more we thought about that and reflected on discussions we had with congregation members individually and in groups and the survey, we kept hearing the idea of concern for our fellow members. How could we enhance that, strengthen that? So the more we talked through that, we came up with the term of life together to really focus on the fact that we are together in this, and there are ways in which we can support each other. I was reminded very vividly of it when my wife broke her wrist and was not even aware of Loaves and Fishes program meals until that happened for 3 months. And lo and behold, members of the congregation I really had never met or didn't even know about came bringing food. That type of care and concern, and the things that we do for with pastoral care also for that concern. So we picked up on the life together, I think, to strengthen what we do and make it much more obvious, and therefore provide direction for moving that area. So life together, caring for one another, is certainly a major concern, and we hope that term helps us be much more aware of that, especially obviously now in the COVID situation. Thank you. And thanks again for our team for working on this for 10 months and finally putting it together. Okay.
Thank you. Now, Carol, we did not talk about this, but you had such involvement on the strategic plan, and just knowing you, I feel like you might have thoughts that you want to share about the strategic plan. Anything you want to talk about with it?
I think folks did great on highlighting the initiatives and the focus. We focused on developing each slide this way with naming our foundations and naming our connections. And part of that came from reading the chapel's strategic plan, where they said, we're going to continue to do X, Y, and Z. And I thought, it's important to name what we're doing well. And so that's there, and I hope we can claim that and affirm it and keep it going. And then to focus on how can we expand that. I think this strategic plan has some challenges for us and growth areas for us, but it is not so aspirational that it is not achievable. So I think it's really actually achievable, and that I think is realistic and good and solid and moves us forward in good directions. I think the plan also helps us remember our specific role within this larger system, that we really do focus on supporting worship, on mission, on education, fellowship, and life together. So that reminds us of clarity of who we are and what our role is in the bigger whole.
Thanks, Carol. The strategic plan document it's very well structured. It is certainly attainable. One of my goals is to, in the past, the strategic plan it gets created, there's a little bit of fanfare, it gets voted on, and then it fades away. And one of my goals is to make sure that as we go through the leadership, that we do not let the strategic plan fade away this time, that we keep it front and center. And one of the ways we're going to do this is have this meeting every year. But that's not going to be enough. It's going to be important to trot this out and you don't need to go through the entire plan with your committee, but trot this out and say, hey, let's take a look at this. In our strategic plan, it says one of the things we need to try to do is la 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 la. Let's talk about that. Let's see whether we can do something about la 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 la. And so I want to just emphasize that with the council, I'm going to keep bringing up the strategic plan and try to keep it nearby. I think our bylaws have some wisdom in that they have the vice president be the person who puts together the strategic plan, because that person is going to be in the leadership around for longer, typically, than the president is. And so Brady, when we shift over from me to you, I do suspect that you'll be able to keep that going as well, and we'll maintain energy for it.
Greg, one more thought regards to how to keep that present.
Yeah.
I do consulting work for nonprofits in the Durham area. And one thing that many of them adopt is having the first agenda item on their board meetings being a review of this progress against the strategic plan.
Oh.
It's typically done, in a very short, concise way about accomplishments against the plan, picking out 2 or 3 different areas. But it serves to provide context for the board meetings for these organizations to make sure that they are focusing their energies in the areas that they said they wanted to in the strategic plan. So just a thought for you to consider as a mechanism for keeping it up in front of the organization.
Yes. No, I appreciate that very much. That's a very good idea. And one way we might have that be carried out within our leadership. It was mentioned, Whitney mentioned earlier how we have the council representatives send in reports ahead of time. Maybe that's an element we ask people to talk about in those reports. So council members, you might hear from me in a few weeks about that, of taking that approach. So we have caught up on time. Thank you to everyone for your attentiveness and your participation so far. This is going very well. And we're going to take a 6-minute break, and we will reconvene at 11:10. I'll see you in just a moment. Be back at 11:10 sharp.
And I would encourage you, you don't need to log off. Leave your computer on and running. Just go get a drink of water if you need it or whatever else.
Carol, can I ask you a question?
Yes, I was going to say, those of us who are left, we can chat. Take yourself off.
I didn't catch who that was who talked about a group they work with. They take a few minutes at the beginning of a board meeting to talk about the strategic plan. Who was that?
That's Bill Jones. He's still here.
Oh, Bill, yes.
That's a good idea, Bill. Yep.
Bill, you still there?
I'm still here.
Yeah. What do y'all do at the beginning of the board meeting? What do you do? Take a certain aspect of the strategic plan or the whole plan?
Typically, we've done the whole plan. Typically, when I've done strategic plans for different organizations, we have certain objectives throughout the year.
Okay.
That are a bit more quantitative than what we have in our strategic plan here, and they report just kind of on a very quick basis. Sometimes we use a stoplight method, green, yellow, red, which means we're making green is good progress, yellow is there are some challenges, and red means we need some help from the council or the board.
Yeah.
So you can use a number of different ways of doing that, but it provides a context for the council's or the board's activities. Because if you're doing things that aren't aligned with your strategic plan, you got to ask yourself, why am I doing those?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because we all deal with limited resources.
Right.
We all deal with limited time. So if what we're talking about in the board meeting is not aligned with the strategic plan, something's out of whack.
So you're spinning wheels or wasting time or
or something.
Okay.
And
that's an excellent idea because again, the concern within our planning team was you hate for these things to be put on the shelf for the next 5 years.
That's why you do it at the beginning of every meeting.
Yeah.
And we typically are able to do it in less than 15 minutes.
Okay. So it's not overburdening the group.
Exactly, to kind of scope it for you.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and you're right, Bill, a lot of strategic plans have more quantitative aspects to it. And maybe we weren't courageous enough to do that.
Yeah.
But
Would you recommend that?
a lot of things in church, you know, how do you quantify we're growing in connection to one another, you know? And I'm sure there are ways to do that. But yeah.
There definitely are. I mean, you know, it's about having the appropriate progress metrics, right? And it doesn't mean that, you know, you have to have something that is unachievable, but it gives you some measure of I'm making progress over where I was before.
Yeah.
I imagine it helps keep the group from getting bogged down in details on other topics, and helps keep the big picture in mind.
Absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
great point.
Yeah. Very
Well,
nice.
and one of the things that, you know, is consistent through, I don't know, 3 or 4 strategic plans is this desire for greater connection within the congregation. We don't know each other as members. We feel all spread out. You know your pockets of people, but you don't know the larger group. You know, and I don't know, I think Craig, actually, you mentioned once, maybe that's just not something we're going to be great at, you know, because every congregation has its gifts. You know, some people feel very connected to the groups they're involved in, right? But not as the whole. So,
yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't continue to strive for it.
Exactly. That's just what I was going to say is hate to give up on that one.
Right.
But setting sort of appropriate goals that don't feel unattainable there for our situation, for our unusual geographic disbursement, not disparity, disbursement.
Yeah.
And
the fact that, you know, on Sunday morning, it's not just us. So, you know, you get a sense of a little bit more of who you are if it's just congregants. But, you know, we've got an assortment of folks. But nonetheless, of course we want to deepen those connections with each other.
Yeah. So Craig, maybe you and I can chat a little more about how to keep the strategic plan in front of our council as we move forward. Bill has some good ideas there.
Yeah, that sounds good.
You know, this is Beth. Sorry, I'm just butting in, but one of the things I was thinking of as we were talking about that is that I wasn't always so terribly good with my committee about saying, okay, here's what we're looking to do that's bigger picture than just we need to go recruit people, we need to do leadership development. And I'm wondering if sometimes the committee chair is also the council rep, but sometimes they're not. And so to be able to say whoever is chairing each of the committees, why don't you just make this one of the things that's part of your meeting once a month, whenever you have your meetings, just the very first thing, here's our goal, how are we getting toward it, what kinds of things do we need to do? So that's my thought.
Thanks, Beth. And, you know, to bring this up, we're going to take this up probably in the executive committee. This seems like a good topic for that smaller group of people to think about how to structure that. So with 4 of us and Carol, we'll sort of work out how to put the strategic plan in structurally and not just as a good thought. It is 11:11, and we're going to move on to the second half of our agenda, which is focusing on the year ahead. Now, many of you had some great suggestions already during our earlier section when we reflect on the past year, and we've captured those. But when we focus on the year ahead, the main question that we have here is what will bind our many activities as a congregation together as a single body in Christ? I think one of the things we struggle with is that our congregation has a lot of activities that are going on. There's a lot of things. The monthly e-news has a huge list of things that are going on. And yet, in all those different activities, we can sometimes lose track of not the biggest sense that we are a church, we are a Christian church that follows Jesus Christ and that sort of thing. We got that, but what's that next level down that binds us together as a congregation and defines us? And more, what's the next level down from our mission and vision statement, which we all feel strongly strongly about and feel so connected through that statement. And so what I want to do is to work together, not just to brainstorm, but actually work some to coalesce and try to whittle down to 3 to 5, I'm going to call them connecting statements, things that will help leaders and committees tie their work to what broadly defines us in the year ahead. So in a sense, we have the strategic plan, it has some specific things, but looking for the intersection between what's there and then sort of the current year, not just the current 5 years, but what makes sense in the current year, the current environment, to help connect everything that we're doing together. So there are the things to connect together are the mission and vision statement, which I'm going to read aloud. It's at the top of your page, but believing that God reaches out to us with love and forgiveness, we seek to grow together in faith through worship, study, service, and life together to embody Christ's compassion and holiness. And out of that statement comes our strategic plan that we've talked about. And so those are the sort of ever-present multi-year things. But in the year ahead, we have two other things that guide us. We have a theme of prayer, which has been selected already, and the connection to Psalms, as was mentioned earlier. And then we have elements of our present reality. What comes first to mind to me is the COVID-19 pandemic and how that has interrupted our typical rhythms of our life together. But there may be other things that come to mind for you. And so in a moment, what I would like you guys to do, you'll spend 10 minutes again in a breakout group. It'll be a different breakout group than you had before. Choose somebody who has not yet been a recorder or speaker today to take that job. And you may also want to choose someone who helps lead the discussion and sort of keeps things moving, which may be that person or maybe someone else. And what I'd like you to do is try to discuss and come up with a somewhat brief connecting statement that you think would be useful for leaders committees to tie individual work to what defines us. So as an example, a statement one I came up with is, let's work harder this year to let's add effort to connect member to members informally. What are things we can do to do that? Because we talked about trying to get life together, and we talked about how the pandemic makes that harder. So what are other ways we can connect members informally and not just through our formal communications? I know this is a little bit of a less well-defined ask, and so I want to see whether people have questions about what they are supposed to be doing. Okay, so 10 minutes or so then in breakout groups. And Carol, you may set those off now.
In fact, one thing that we ought to do is to put together.
Hi, Ken. Thank you for saying yes.
You're welcome. How are you, Lucy? We'll need a couple of different levels, basic and advanced.
Carol, I'm curious, as host, do you end up in one of these small groups, or are you excluded because you're the host?
I was not automatically put in a group, but I could have joined a group.
Okay, very, very good. It looks like everyone is back now, and the way we're gonna do this in terms of is we're going to go group by group, and so everyone had a group number, and if you don't remember it, then that's okay. We'll make sure we get to you. But we're going to go group by group in order, and I'm going to ask that each group sort of share what they came up with. It does not need to be a fully formed, statement or that sort of thing, but give a sense of where they were. And so let's start with that, and then we'll go from there. So group one, which I think was my group, Mary, how will you summarize our conversation?
Sure. So the main thought that we kept coming back to was that we are a community that prays together. And one area to keep in mind is that prayer is an additional means of providing support, whether that's for members, organizations that we support, and the broader community, and that we should sort of seek to deepen our understanding of how prayer can be a means of support, especially in this unusual time. And not only that, but that we need to try to deepen our understanding of what a prayer is and how we can pray, and what we pray for. And that would be an important conversation to have in committees and small groups with congregation members throughout the year.
Thank you, Mary. Who was group two?
Is that us? I'm really not sure.
Go ahead, Janelle.
I have two thoughts from my group that I wrote down. Well, I wrote down a lot, but two things came out. One is that maybe we should do another round of the calls that were made initially to connect people when we shut down due to COVID. And with that, remember that some people are comfortable praying with others and some are not. So be cognizant of that. And the second thought that came out was that the leader of each small group or committee or planning group should realize the place of prayer in the group and have someone make sure that prayer is a part of all of our meetings.
Thanks, Janelle. Group three.
So this is Fran. I think we were group two, so.
Go ahead.
I can go ahead.
Sorry.
We were group 6.
6. I couldn't remember the number. Sorry.
Okay, I was going to report for group 3, or
No,
are we?
Let's do Fran
group two?
first, then we'll come to you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I think one of our theme was that change, and that the body of Christ is always changing and growing, and that the pandemic has caused changes in both the congregation and the chapel as institutions, and in us as individuals. And so we need to be alert to the changes and to those opportunities that changes bring. For example, after the pandemic is over, there's still going to be a higher toleration and demand for Zoom. And there was uniform approval for the virtual annual meeting just being efficient. And then also just our sheer dependence on hoping in the Lord for more guidance and grace and kindness to extend to others. And the desire to still find ways also to meet face-to-face, for example, for communion, and also for smaller groups as part of the greater whole, and for those smaller groups to have hopefully some face-to-face as well as the virtual participation.
Okay, now the true group 3.
Okay, great. So we were following along with the idea of how to engage the members and community and organizations through prayer. One of the suggestions was to invite members of the congregation to sit in on committee meetings. Another suggestion was to set up prayer meeting groups or small groups to engage the members and get to know some of the members better. And there's also a suggestion for a congregation suggestion box or a formal way for the congregation to engage with suggestions for carrying out some of these goals.
Thank you, Diane.
Sure.
On to group, what was 4?
Yes. So we talked a bit about what was heavy on everyone's minds was race relations and the issue of systemic racism and learning about that from within a church congregation. So we expressed the desire for a commitment to education about race relations in our community, both in the church and Durham at large. And then we also talked some about the generational diversity. And so we talked about maybe the possibility of small groups that aim for including people of different generations. So that was one idea. There's also, and we didn't get to talk about this, I'll just say this for myself. One thing I think is important is to have diverse, and I get this might be difficult right now and only online services, but diverse representation of different generations within the service. So I think like if you, if I'm a young person and I see a, young prayers or, reading scripture or something like that, then I'm like, oh, this is a place where they like having young people serve. And I think that might be the case across different generations.
Thank you, Nathaniel. What was group 5?
I believe that's us. We talked a lot about how do we take the theme this year, which is prayer, how do we take that theme mobile, e.g. out of the book groups and bring it out to others. Beth mentioned that when Duke Chapel had students on mission trips for spring break, that there would be a piece of cloth that would have the names of all the students who were on the mission trips, and they would cut it up into pieces, each piece having the name of a student, and then these pieces would be distributed to others to pray about the students for the week that they were on the trip. And we also talked about, the upcoming communion outdoor communion that we're going to have, and how perhaps some elements could be blessed, and then people who are in attendance there could take individual Tupperwares to do kind of like a DoorDash thing to deliver communion to people who don't feel comfortable themselves in a more, gathering in a group like that or a small group. So really kind of taking the message and the theme out, whether but in a literal sense with a piece of cloth or the elements, or at a meeting, sharing and going and finding someone in the congregation who would benefit from just having a prayer or a communion, even through just an open door.
Thank you, Whitney. One group left, group 7, the original group 7.
Okay. We spent most of our time talking about, and this was mentioned before, Zoom has become pretty normal for many people now, and there's almost, even though there are many ways, and I think many good ways it could be used after this is over, we want to remember that this is not the normal way of contacting people. We want to remember, several people in our groups have reminded that we are human. We need to reach out and touch, as the old commercial used to say. We need to find ways to remain human despite the COVID thing, and be sure that we just don't make it become the new normal totally. I think that kind of sums up what we said.
What we're going to do next is I'm going to ask people to take a look at these 7 things. I'm going to ask people just quietly for a minute. We're going to look at these items, and Jen is doing a great job of getting them all on the same page. Take a moment quietly and try to see what connections you see between these items and what themes you see emerging. And then I'll ask for volunteers to just say those things. We'll take just a minute here in silent reflection. I'll go ahead and start. One of the things I want to focus on a word Diane said, this inviting congregation members and this sense of invitation. I see the idea of invitation in many of the other things. Our own group talked about inviting our partners to, inviting our external agencies that we support, inviting them to share what we might pray for with them. Or Beth talked about inviting people to prayer, or this idea that we have Zoom, and we sometimes we're trying to get together. It's hard to, you sort of have to bring yourself if you're not feeling invited. And so I'm interested in the idea of invitation, that especially now we always have an invitation to prayer. But an invitation to the table, community was mentioned, but also inviting people on a personal level to be to connect with each other. What are some other sort of key words and key themes that people see together? Go ahead, Ben.
I'm seeing a theme of engagement in all the statements. Engaging the congregation, engaging people, engaging different people, diversity, activities.
A word that comes to mind is intentional.
Mm-hmm. And that very much cuts to prayer. Prayer is a very intentional activity. I mean, it's not something that just happens to you. You have to decide, I'm going to pray.
What comes to mind is practice. The word practice, so prayer practice specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're having a theme, like last year we had a theme of discernment. We talked a lot about it, but did we do any discernment together as a congregation in specific? We did it with strategic planning, but this year we're talking a lot about prayer, and most of the suggestions have to do with getting involved in something, being in a group, join a committee, all these things have to do with practice, but creating a space for people to actually practice prayer together and learn how to do it well.
Yeah, and some of the suggestions we've had today have been, are there new practices that we can establish so that a good intention becomes something that we actually do, and that becomes through the intention of, I'm going to practice this and not just sort of hope it happens.
Let me comment on both prayer groups, but also the word prayer needs sharing. My general impression is a prayer group might imply everyone's expected to lead in a prayer, but there are a number of people who are very uncomfortable with that, but they certainly would like to have the atmosphere or the setting where they could state prayer needs, so that they can listen in with prayers of others, but they have a vehicle for expressing their prayer needs, and therefore being more comfortable with that setting.
Yeah, and I want to expand on that a little bit because it also connects to what Nathaniel was saying, that we as individuals connect to the congregation. We want to connect in diverse ways, and we have different things that we want to that we want to do. Then not everyone's going to want to connect with the congregation in the same way or connect with each other in the same way. There is a diversity in how we want to connect with God. Some pray a lot, some pray a little. And we want to be mindful of that as we do these other things. This is wonderful. Keep going. What other connecting words are people seeing as they look at the what the 7 groups had to say?
I thought we were still doing the COVID, the connection calls. I was still doing mine, so I didn't think that was a one-time thing. So let me know. Okay. But I plan to, I do it about once every 2 or 3 weeks now, or a month. But you know, I thought we were still doing it.
I think that came from our group, that, you know, maybe we should do another round of initiating. Some of them are still going, but some of the ones that sort of struck out initially, maybe it'd be worth pinging again.
Yeah. Okay.
I think in all of these statements above, we're looking for ways to be more active. We've been in a period of sort of passive participation, and I think the fact that we realize now that this is not a short time situation with an endpoint, we're looking at who knows how long. We're looking for ways to be actively involved rather than just passively participating. So
I would say education, deepening our understanding of race relations. You said something about prayer with that. You know, and maybe focusing more on race relations in our prayer groups as well.
I would suggest that we, implied in all of this is an engagement, is really fellowship. I'm involved in another organization and I'm on a committee, and we now meeting almost every other Friday at noon. And I look forward to that because as a group, I've gotten to know them much better. And I find if we skip a meeting, I really miss that fellowship. So it's an engagement type of thing that in small groups, that if we could get that going would be great, I think.
Thank you. What we're going to do now, so we're going to stay on this page, and we have sort of these sort of 9 words, and we're going to try to distill this further. And the aim now is to create statements that combine 2 or 3 of these words, and sort of, and it needs to be a statement. It needs to be something that says, a committee can read it, a congregation member can read it and say, we are going to try to do this. So it needs to have some sort of active thing. And if you want to start it with, we are going to try, as a congregation, we're going to try, that might be just how you start any of these statements. This year, as a congregation, we are going to try. And then what is the way that we can complete this statement using some of these key words that we've had? And what I'd like to do, if possible, is to end up with 3 to 5 statements that really include everything that we have here. I think there's nothing here that says, oh gosh, no, that's not us. I mean, speak up if you think differently, but I feel like this feels like us to me. And so what ideas do people have to connect some of these words together and complete the statement? As a congregation, we're going to try this year to.
As a congregation, we're going to actively engage with each other in our prayer practice.
Craig, if I could just make one word change, I'd get rid of the word try.
Let's do that.
Because it introduces an element of lack of commitment.
I agree. I agree with you.
Okay.
An element of risk.
All right. So, Michael, thank you. So, actively engage with each other in our prayer practice. Other ideas? If someone uses a word, that doesn't mean you can't use it. Also, in a statement idea that you have. So.
Greg, I like the phrase intentionally engage with each other.
Can I sort of add to that sentence?
What was that, Michael? Oh.
Unmuted.
You're on mute.
Yeah, he's muted.
The phrase intentionally engage with each other, I was suggesting that we can make it a bit more specific by saying in fellowship, for instance.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to have some specificity in these. I agree.
I was seeing a list of things after the phrase intentionally engage with each other, and then maybe a list of activities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think as a congregation this year, we are going to invite members to engage in fellowship activities or through fellowship activities.
Thank you. We've caught a lot of the words here. What about education? Can someone get at the education into the statement?
I've been thinking a lot recently, and this says it up there in the discussion about race relations, and then, you know, the matter of recognizing, for those of us who are white, that we have white privilege and we don't even know we have it, and we don't even see it, and maybe some doing, you know, doing something to help us become more aware and more, just more aware, and seeing what we can do to help racial harmony go forward.
Invite people, maybe we invite people to engage in a racial inequity training. I did that this spring, and you can hardly do that and not need prayer and need to pray.
I think kind of just to follow up on those last two statements, I would say that we're going to actively engage in developing educational opportunities around understanding race relations.
If I don't get exactly what you say, feel free to correct me. Or if I don't get what you think I should say.
You're doing a great job. Are there, now look at this list of connecting statements. Are there elements in here that you feel have not been, are there facets that we've been talking about in this last 20 minutes where you feel like we've lost the thread, we've sort of lost the intention or spirit around something?
So I'll say, I think we've lost some of what Brady was saying about how people want to engage differently.
Yeah.
I think we've made some broad statements about like, let's engage with each other, but I don't think we've recognized that people don't engage in the same ways always.
I see. So as a congregation this year, we're going to look for new ways to engage congregation members. Yeah, sure.
Maybe even new and diverse ways.
Yeah.
That gets at the fact that not everyone connects in the same ways. And so if you have multiple modalities of connection, I think that you can reach and draw in more people.
Yeah.
I'm getting a new thought here, and I know I'm new, and I'm new to the congregation because I'm new to the community as well. But our name is the Congregation at Duke University Chapel, and right now we are the congregation without Duke University Chapel. So in a way, we are maybe creating a new intention to be a congregation without a building to restrict us, or any kind of restrictions that keeps us separate from each other. In other words, we're a congregation whether we have the chapel or not, or whether we have the constrictions of racial understanding or generational understanding, age, and so on.
Without a building. Yeah.
I think that is.
But I would just, sorry, but I would just say that the Duke University Chapel is more than a building. It is about, you know, all the worship service and the other things that they provide, regardless of where we're doing it.
Right,
So
right.
I'd be careful about just focusing on it as a building.
Yeah, yeah.
That is more my point. I mean, maybe what we're trying to do in the statement is have a statement that recognizes that fact, but not necessarily in words, but that, I don't know how to phrase it. It's a very difficult concept, but
sort of recognize our identity beyond the physical structure of Duke Chapel.
So just one word of caution, I would hate that, you know, one of our connecting statements weakens our relationship with the chapel. I mean, you know, I think we ought to be going in the opposite direction and strengthening our relationship with chapel.
Right, right. So,
but my intention was not to have that in the statement, but to help with the thinking of creating the statement.
Yeah. So we'll do some word crafting with these. Go ahead.
Craig, let me make one observation there. All good points. Seems to me we've gotten frustrated with Zoom. A lot of people have, but on the other hand, we're quite often getting used to it, and it's going to be part of our life, it seems to me, from this point on. And it provides lots of innovative, creative ways in which we, I think, build more relationships, build more connections as we become more comfortable with it. Realize it's not the ideal pattern, but it's another tool for building these engagements and connections.
Mm-hmm.
Craig, one other thought as you take this data and try and build the 3 to 5 connecting statements.
Yeah.
Another dimension is, so what would the congregation look like if we were successful in the connecting statement? What would be different?
Oh, well,
right? As opposed to just a generic statement, try and translate that into, so what would it really look like if we were successful?
You say you do this consulting for nonprofits as a living? You're quite good at it. Go ahead.
The one quick word, I really think that it is quite important, you know, just like, you know, we're all striving to learn, you know, to learn about our cultural privilege, primarily as white people. I think that there, as Jen pointed out, there has to be some sensitivity to, you know, a lot of us are doing better and better with Zoom, but there are a good number of people who either are uncomfortable with that or whatever. So we really do need to be sensitive to the multitude of ways that we reach out to people, and not only so much focus on this one means. I think that's truly important.
Thank you. All right. So thank you so much. This is a lot of wonderful, deep thinking about congregation and where we should be going from here. I feel like the whole day has given us these these 2 hours have given us an opportunity to think more about who we are as a congregation in our current moment, in our recent history, in our whatever the opposite of recent is, our near future. And the next step, what I want to do, I'm going to take this document and sort of everything that Jen, our wonderful scribe and note taker, has done here, and I'm going to take this and do some more summarization, and then I will be also, and then I'll be checking on, and then I'll be connecting with the exec committee, and we're going to talk more about this, probably also bring it to the council just to sort of flesh out and make sure that we're being intentional in what we say here. We're not going to put out anything and just say, hey, this is what we think. We're going to make sure that we have a broad agreement about the words being used here. This leadership retreat was a chance to get us together, give us a chance to think about these things, get all these ideas together. And now we'll need a little bit of time to make sure that we can make sure that what comes out of this is both accurate in terms of who we are as a congregation, and also usable and practical, and something that's going to lead to that, lead to change. With that, again, thank you. Go ahead, Carol.
It looks like Regina has her hand up.
Regina, go ahead.
She's muted.
Regina, are you on mute?
Yeah, I had put up my hand earlier, but I didn't have anything really more to add to the conversation.
Oh, okay.
I just don't want folks feeling, as being a Black congregant, I don't want folks feeling a whole lot of guilt, because it's a lot of work that we have to do in our own community. And, I could go on a long tyrant about that, but I've always felt that I have been part of the body of Christ there at the congregation, and I'm thankful for the welcoming and being a part of belonging. And I think Christ Jesus has always had the answer concerning righteousness and justice that we as the church have not done really well, whether it's the white church or even the Black church, that we have to go back to the gospel, and the answers are there. And we have to decide whether or not we are courageous enough to do it, to do the work. And this is going to be a long journey.
Thank you so much, Regina. A long journey indeed. That's all I have to say, except what I was going to say. Oh, yes. Thank you all for being here. Thank you especially to the congregational leaders who had been done with the term and coming back for one more thing. Of course, we expect you not to go off and disappear, but appreciate your service and appreciate your being here. Carol, may I hand it to you for a closing prayer?
Certainly. I concur with Craig and with some of the notes that I've seen in the chat function. My goodness, folks, you have done very good work today, and I'm so grateful. And I am grateful for the ways this lays a foundation for us, building on our past and acknowledging what's happened in our past, both recent and farther, and moving forward into the future. So thank you for agreeing to be leaders of this congregation. It is essential what you do, and I give thanks to God for that. What I'd like to share by way of closing is some thoughts from the current book group, which is this, Christ My Companion. It's a series of meditations on a section of a prayer of St. Patrick known as the breastplate prayer. And there's a chapter on Christ behind me. The prayer says Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, etc., various angles that Christ surrounds us. And this chapter is on Christ behind me. And there's two things that the author brought to my attention, which I thought I'd like to share with you. The first, one way to think of Christ behind us is that Christ is from behind us, pushing us forward. And the author says, it is good to remember that sometimes Christ, our brother, our leader, our guide, our captain, goes behind us, allowing us to grow in wisdom and trust and confidence by stepping up to the front line. So you all have stepped up to the front line, and maybe Christ is pushing us together to move forward. She also uses the image of Christ behind us, and she thinks of gleaning, going behind the harvester. And so another way to consider Christ behind us is this. The Christ who walks behind gathers what we scatter, even when it is not ripe grain, but the detritus of broken promises and failures and poor choices. Christ walks behind us to pick up the pieces, to suffer with those who suffer from our poor choices, and to transform broken shards into blessing, bringing good out of evil as only he can. So even as we push forward into the future and step forward into what we believe Christ is calling us to do, or pushing us forward into allowing Christ to move us forward, so also we can have confidence that where we have made mistakes, where we have failed, Christ is coming behind us to pick up the broken pieces which are left behind. So with those two thoughts, let me read the prayer, the section of the prayer, which is the focus of this book. Let us pray. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ within me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ at my right, Christ at my left, Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks to me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. May it be so. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Carol. The meeting is now over. You may leave without apology. You may stay and chat for the next 10 or 15 minutes if you'd like to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so good to see everybody.
That it is.
Could
Still
you
alive and
give us-
well.
Could you give us the name of that book again?
Christ, my companion.
Great, thank you.
I describe it with the book group as taking this one image and like you might look at a diamond or a cut gem, you're looking at various facets of one idea from various angles.
I've always liked that prayer,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to read the book.
Yeah.
There are two really good, beautiful settings of that to music that I found on YouTube. And if anybody wants to email me, I'll send you the links to them.
I know I've sung one of them because it's.
Yeah, me too.
Mass at the Children,
And it's in my
Mass at the
head.
Children, Last Movement. Rather, Mass at the Children, the Final Movement. And then there's another one. I've forgotten exactly what. Yeah.
Oh, great.
And Lucy, there's several of these books around town, so after other people are done with it, they might want to pass it on to you.
That makes sense.
Craig, very well done meeting.
Oh, good.
Very good.
As always, you do.
Yeah,
You're on a tight ship.
Yeah, Greg, thank you.
Thanks. I was just thinking about how it's very signifying that we're doing book groups virtually, and that it's very intentional that we have physical books that we're still looking at. That even though we're meeting virtually, we're very much comfortable with having a physical book. And no one suggested, hey, let's have an online PDF study.
You never know who's got the audiobook, you know.
Well,
I must say, being an extrovert and separated from so many people, I actually enjoy being part of Zoom conferences because it's the only way I get to see people and hear people and be somewhat near them.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see right here, you're this close.
we're touching, Steve. We're touching.
So our little friends in Switzerland, we had our usual Skype with last week, and they've always been pretty good, especially the younger ones. They understand that we're far away, but at some point, Ariane just reached out to hug, and it was, you know, I think they are actually out and about far more than Americans because they've gotten hold of things, but I think they're feeling the same kind of thing where it's just so far away, and you know, we want to see each other. So Steve, I'm waiting for you to figure out the way to be able to do docent duty online.
There
We'll
you
have
go.
all those people, you know, let us join you, and we'll show you all the pictures and explain everything. And, you know, I think it's doable.
You know what? We could record a couple of docent tours, you know, from different perspectives. Could be kind of fun.
Yep. Yep.
That, yeah, actually, if we had a series of pictures, I mean, we can use them, call them up on the screens like this and then talk about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like work.
It does sound like work, but that's okay. I mean, what else are we going to do, right?
Got that? Did we get some footage with a drone flying around the chapel? They sent out a couple of night. I want to see that.
It has to be requested, and it's a triplicate form, and it has to be notarized, and you have to specify the number of minutes and the number of feet in the air. No, I've seen it. It's no.
Do you remember a while back when they asked if they could actually do drones inside the chapel?
Well, see, I think
that
that's
was a big no.
Huh? Yeah,
That was the Marvelous Night group did some. They put a drone up before the news crew
inside.
Did.
Yeah.
Inside.
So they got all those gorgeous stained glass shots and everything, like all the
Those were drones.
Yeah.
Well, there's a guy who flies drones in the meadow here behind our house, and I've talked to him while he's doing it, and he has excellent control. And in the chapel, you wouldn't have strong enough winds to move them around. It's actually an exciting idea, but I'm sure there's a bunch of people who wouldn't agree.
I mean, you'd want somebody who knew what they were doing, which is, I think, probably why the news crew was able to get approval, because they had professionals.
And insurance.
And insurance, right.
When this is the first time they talked about doing this, maybe drones weren't quite so sophisticated back then, but this was as they were starting the Capitol campaign, however many years ago, Duke Forward. And I've never seen so many apoplectic